How do you think Nintendo, with all of their popular titles and even with new IP that is going to be released, how do you think they're going to approach the market in the 20s?
How are they going to approach the market? I think they're going to stay with what they've been doing. Like the directs have been fine. I don't know how they're going to handle content creators. It's probably going to stay the same, sadly. As for how tackling the market, they have a good spread, and the key thing is that because the Switch is popular, other devs at least want in. So, like Nintendo themselves, they'll do what they keep doing. They'll keep advertising. They might have more directs now, which will be nice. They send other things like that.
I agree with you. I do like what they're doing now. I just wish that they would, like I think I said earlier, just get more competitive. You don't have to
Yeah,
compete with Sony with your engines for your games, but like aesthetically and soundtrack wise, Nintendo games are so incredible and they're very immersive. I want to see more of that. The same way Detective Pikachu was a popular release. I want to see them do more live action movies. I can't wait for a good live action Metroid movie. Sonic was popular. Is it maybe like a Pikmin adaptation for Netflix or like
and that'd be
Mario?
cool.
Like it would be great for them to actually take more chances because they have the money and they have the IPs. Why not do something
Yeah,
more with them?
yeah. It's one of those things where it's like they obviously have it. Like I understand why they don't, from a theoretical side. Like especially with any form of business, be it like trading stocks or anything else. Part of the business decision is the concept of minimizing loss if someone messes up along the way, if it's a total disaster, which is I think partially feeds into why Pokemon doesn't get enough funding. And also, like yes, they can make more, and I am amongst everyone. I'm like everyone else. We want them to do more, but I just understand like especially for an old Japanese businessman, and that risk is really high. We just need someone to prove to them or something like that that they can do more. Things aren't a one hit wonder. The question is also like, okay, they invest money. How are they sure that everything's as quality? And unfortunately, there's also the corporate capitalism of, okay, what is the return on investment? Is it a
Yeah.
stable community? Unfortunately, with Pokemon and Sword and Shield sales, that's not a good measure for them. From an objective standpoint, it's success. Sword and Shield successful. Well, that's all there is to it. It speaks. Money doesn't really speak to the quality. It just speaks to how much they make, etc. There are other things like at least they're at least on like competitive games, finally replacing the servers. There's from what I've heard, so it's like okay, theoretically things might get better,
Yeah.
but there's going to be because they are replacing servers. There's going to be a very awkward transition period. Um, it's just like you of course wish that Nintendo and all their IPs they do more with it, but there's is that whole thing of that risk for them. You want them to take the risk. Hopefully they do one day.
Yeah, I really do hope so because there is expectations for game releases now that mirrors or even dwarfs cinema releases, and especially now that we haven't been able to go see a movie, we haven't been able to go to big events, and it's looking like throughout this year it's going to be the same thing. We're not going to have those moments as people. Everyone's looking towards games. There's been so much talk about GTA 6 for so many years. People up until the release of Cyberpunk were talking about it being huge. I would love if Nintendo would get in on that and they would create, whether it's like I would prefer something new, but like whether it's the next Zelda game or it's like that big Pokemon game we've always wanted, that MMO style of game, that free roam style of game, I want Nintendo to actually create their masterpiece. They create really amazing games, but you can tell it's from like a more consumerish standpoint. They want to tide you over until the next sequel or the next release. And sometimes I play a game and it doesn't feel complete. It feels like they were focusing more on the aesthetic and more on just giving us a product for now and not so much creating a timeless masterpiece. And maybe that's just too much of my expectations, but I also know that like Donkey Kong, the Metroid, as I mentioned earlier, you have a lot of the fighting games. You have all the N64 games, Perfect Dark. You had GoldenEye. Like throughout so many eras of Nintendo, there were great releases, but I feel like we don't really have that sort of excitement for their releases anymore. How do you feel?
Yeah, for part of it is going older, part of it is that they're once again at the forefront of their, or there's there's just so much great that it's like it feels like anything less, and there are has been actually objectively a lot of things less as things are falling flat. You just like want them to do more. You want them to be epic. You want them to do that amazing thing. Um, it's kind of weird again with that whole risk analysis thing. I've actually given this a weird amount of thought towards like what will it actually cost to make something like this? And there are a number of problems again with certain things like, okay, how many workers do they need to hire for this? How many managers do they need to hire? What's the fallout for like things that when things go wrong? They can do a great magnum opus and like a great thing. Which IP would it be? What will they actually do that isn't been done? What will actually have the Nintendo charm? There are a lot of these weird questions. Hence, I think the problem again is as a Japanese company, Nintendo's like, with a few exceptions, they're stuck in that safe zone because it minimizes loss. That's the key aspect. Like, we see their profits, great. We see how much they end up losing, like with the Wii U era. Okay, that's a problem. They can do it, and we all know that they are perfectly capable, or they actually have the funding to outsource something. But there are other things to take into consideration. Well, one thing that I've part of it is the Switch hardware, but other things like part of the thing I've been seeing a lot of is like a lot of people showing off what they can do with Unreal, something like Unreal Engine 4, which is something that Nintendo themselves aren't going to indulge in. They're going to make their own engine because that means they have more control. If anything goes wrong, it's their own fault. It's like it's this weird thing where it's like, okay, you can outsource for a lot of things, but that's also what we call an ingress point. A lot of things to juggle. I've mainly been talking about a lot of other things, but I agree. There's something that you want Nintendo. We just want Nintendo to do more, of course. But there's a lot of things behind the scenes we just don't know about.